What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Beneath the Gi. On this episode, we'll be talking a little bit about Kali sparring. Now, normally our Kali training is very straight to the point. A lot of what we do, we can transfer it into reality-based scenarios or competition-based scenarios. Now, obviously, when we transfer it to the competition side, we gotta modify it just a little bit because, I'm not gonna poke my partner in the eye or I'm not gonna hit them in the groin because that's what my flow or that's what my philosophy is. So we're going to be using padded sticks to demonstrate the techniques that we're going to be using in Kali sparring. A lot of the times, many competitions will use the padded sticks just to avoid any unnecessary harm. However, some competitions do allow live stick training or live stick sparring. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to understand and outline what are my targets. So in Kali sparring, in point or continuous, majority of the times, I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, the points are done from waist up, but that also includes the arms. Okay, so first tip is to hit the hand. And the thing is that as simple as it is, a lot of people overlook it. Many traditional styles, when you spar, especially point sparring, you can only hit the head, side of the head, top of the head, nothing from the back, and then the body. But since we're doing weapon-oriented sparring, the idea is to defang them if the opportunity presents itself. And defanging simply is just cutting the hand or hitting the hand so that it counts as a disarm if it was in reality-based application. So a lot of the times the stick is going to be hovering here, you're going to be sparring, you're going to be interacting. You can do so many different techniques. You can just, tap the hand real quick like a snap, get the point there. You can use circular strikes that hide the stick, get the point there. We can go from angle 2, then cut down. So basically what you're trying to do is get the attention over here to eventually score a point or open up this area to score a second point. So we're sparring here, kind of just hitting the hand, moving away, faking the hand, going to the head, and that's going to allow us to get plenty of points in a short amount of time. So one of my favorite techniques when I'm targeting the hand and I'm looking for just a quick point to get me up on the scoreboard, when the sticks are in front here, I'm actually just going to go for a scoop, so I'm doing a backward C, and as I scoop up, I'm going to hit the hand and end up in my close position. That strike is super quick, it's super short notice so that you don't really get to telegraph with my body. So as I'm here, I just flick, there's my point. Okay, so tip number 2 is to lean your hips. And it's almost like if you ever seen fencing sparring, they do a lot of techniques that allow them to lunge forward. Because normally what happens when you're training or when you're sparring with the sticks, if my partner swings, normally I take a step back, right? And because of the nature of Kali, we do strike after strike after strike. A lot of the times, once I see the first strike and you try to follow up, I'm just going to back off. Okay, which is going to prevent my partner from scoring any points. And it gets a little messy because we have range to play with. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, once I deliver my first strike and my partner takes a step back, I'm going to lean my hips a little more. So I'm going to shift my weight forward, and I'm going to follow up and really reach. Okay, so we call the stick the extension of your hand. And so you want to use it for what it is. If you're sparring here, then you're really taking away what the stick is presenting itself. From this range, I can strike here, and I can go forward and continue to strike. Okay? The problem is if I stay here too long or I put too much weight here, my partner's going to follow up and fire back. So I need to be able to be in this position to either step forward or step backwards to retaliate or to follow up. So one of my favorite techniques that I like to use, and I commonly use it in training, is when I'm doing that lunging motion and I strike down, I go back on the same line. Especially when you're training with Kali experienced fighters, it's funny because we have all these moves, but as soon as I see an angle 1, it's almost assumed that an angle 2 is going to come around. Especially when you're moving in motion and you're really trying to score the point and follow up. I'm going to say 90% of the time people will follow up with a backhand strike, and usually it's a number 2 because that's their go-to, that's their basics. So when I try to switch it up a little bit, they're expecting a different line. I cut down, then I follow up on the same line. And that usually allows me to catch any strikes that are coming on the diagonal. It allows me to catch anything going on the horizontal as well, but that also allows me to follow up quicker and get a little more reach. So you see when I strike down here, my partner takes a step back, I can still hit them because I can reach a little more as I come back up and return to my starting position. And then I still have my steps forward or backwards. So we call that the long range concept, and a lot of techniques done in Kali sparring, or a lot of points that are normally scored, are techniques that happen from medium to close range. It's a lot of the fast hit and snap, hit and snap, hit and snap. A lot of times people, we see people jump and they go for the head, they go bang, and they really just try to go for the quick shot and they get broken by the ref and get their point. A lot of times people will also forget that, the stick is meant to implement techniques from the sword, okay, which requires a lot of slashing, requires a lot of follow through. So by orienting your body in the long range concept, it allows you to really use the stick for what it's meant for, right? So on that note, part of tip number 2 is when I'm in the long range is don't be afraid to step forward to left and right. A lot of the times people get consumed with staying in the right lead, staying in the proper stance, that they become very, very robotic, okay? But as I lean my hips here, if my partner takes a half step back or a full step back, I'm just going to step forward and strike again. Okay, so I'm going to let that flow, and that can be on the opposite side too. I strike here, he comes forward, then I catch him on the backhand side and I strike him there. Okay, so I'm really utilizing my body and my stick all in one motion so that I get the best benefit in the long range concept when it comes to Kali sparring. Okay, so tip number 3, and this one actually plays off of the last 2 tips, is to disguise your strikes. And so as you get experience in sparring, people start to be able to telegraph where your strikes are coming from. It doesn't matter what angle it is, it doesn't matter what technique it is. At the end of the day, it comes down to 2 attacks, a forehand attack or a backhand attack. So if you cut yourself down in the middle line, forehand attack is going to come from the right side to the center line, and then a backhand attack is going to come from the center line to the left side, okay? And that works either if you're left-handed or right-handed. So if I'm sparring my partner right now, and he has a stick chambered on the right side here, I know the strike is coming from the right. I don't know if it's coming from sunrise, I don't know if it's coming from angle 1, I don't know if it's going from the horizontal line, or it's going uppercut, but I do know it's on that side, so I can kind of gauge it a little better. I can come in a little quicker, I can hit him from here, I can hit him with a thrust, something that I know is going to beat his strike, or I can simply just out-move him. I can out-angle him, make him change his position, and make him move into a place that I know I can strike him or that I have a better game at. So when you're sparring and trying to disguise your cuts, especially if you're in a range where you can compress your techniques a little more, not so much from long range, but from medium to close range, instead of you doing this, where it's very easy to telegraph your techniques, a little bit more of this. Okay, it's a lot more elbow tucked in type of format, almost like a boxer's punch, so that there's less telegraphing available. When I decide to strike, it's nice and condensed, and I can strike very quickly without him being able to telegraph that I'm loading up on this angle 1 or I'm loading up on this angle 2. And that allows me to get that point from this range a lot quicker and a lot easier. Alright, so my last tip of the day is to bait the stick out. And this works very well in Kali sparring because your hand needs to be in front and your stick needs to be in front to score a point, but also to avoid a point. So if you can control or kind of dictate where your opponent's stick is going, that leaves your opening much bigger for such a long time where you can actually score a point. So we're sparring over here, and you can do it so many different ways as long as you have good control and you can really sell the strike. And this is where it comes to disguising your cuts and trying to bait them out. So sometimes I'll purposely make my strike a little bigger so that I want my partner to telegraph and I want them to move with me. So let's say I strike, I come here, the stick comes up here, and I cut low. Okay? Or I come up top, sunrise here, and I just change that line. And from waist up, again, that's the point. So I don't need the cleanest cut. I don't need to, hit the pointer. I don't need to hit his ear. I don't need to hit, his shoulder. As long as I hit him, that's a point. And you have to remember that. The weapon, I'm going to cut horizontally, but that could be from shoulder, elbow, floating ribs, waistline, neck, whatever it really is, as long as I actually score the point. One of my favorite techniques that I like to do is I actually like to go to the horizontal line, but I like to go down and shoot my way back up. Okay, so it really gives this big motion. You hear it, okay, and you really see that I'm invested into my strike. So when I come over here, I hit down and I strike again. Usually I hit with an uppercut. Sometimes I'll go to horizontal line again. Sometimes I'll go into a separate technique. But as long as I get the stick to this area, I know that nothing is going to be stopping my strikes that go to the outside, okay, or his backhand, and nothing's going to stop my stick from moving because he's just trying to block this. He doesn't see this. He's only seeing the invested technique that I started him off with. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed those tips on sparring. If you're new, make sure you take your time, make sure you're well equipped with safety and protective gear so that you don't get any random cuts or additional injuries that aren't necessary when it comes to sparring. This is technique, this is control, this is sport, this isn't a bloodbath, okay? So the idea is to use your technique to score a point technically, not because you're stronger, faster. Those things help, but this is still, you still got to have some honor when you're sparring, when you're training, and if you don't, then you're not going to have a partner to train with after that. So make sure that you're in a safe environment, make sure that you have safe equipment, and until next time, we'll catch you guys then.